Welcome to Whiskey and Whiskey. I'm the Whiskey Chaser Brian, and welcome to a very special edition of Whiskey and Whiskey. Coming from a completely different backdrop today, one you haven't seen before, but nonetheless we're very glad to be here. A multi-award winning Paris, Texas bar, smokehouse and restaurant located in the heart of Kilkenny City. Like I said, it's won a number of accolades throughout the years for its food and its whiskey and its hospitality, and it's home to the 2020 or 2021 whiskey bar manager in the world, Patrick Rafter, who's in the background making sure that this all goes smoothly. So I just wanted to say before we start, a very special thanks to Pat and Patrick for allowing us to come in here, drink some great and amazing bourbon, bring it to you on camera. As I said, I'm the Whiskey Chaser Brian. I normally do these shows on my own, and there's another man going to join us, an expert of sorts and a whiskey ambassador for high spirits, Mr. Ian Doog.
Thanks very much, Brian. Delighted to be here.
You're very welcome along. We're very excited. This has been in the plan for a number of weeks/months.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We had a problem with COVID, and
still have a problem with COVID.
We still have a slight problem with COVID. We're getting there. The restrictions have eased a little bit, so we've wanted to do it for quite some time, and some of the most sought after bourbon in the world.
Yeah, it's not often you get to see 5 of these whiskies sitting on a bar counter, especially in Ireland, never mind anywhere in the world. So it's really nice to be here and getting to do a video with you guys and popping these amazing bourbons in front of everybody. So
yeah, and these are available down here, and I should just mention that Paris, Texas are a part of the Kilkenny Whiskey Guild, who basically 10 or 12, 10 whiskey pubs within Kilkenny City that have to have an X amount of whiskey to join in this guild and do tastings and tours of some of the finest whiskey that Kilkenny and indeed Ireland, and as you can see here, the world has to offer. So the pappies that we're going to be drinking very shortly, we might break this video into a couple of pieces. I reckon it's going to be kind of long. There's a lot of information to obtain here and historical relevance. So the 3 pappies, the 15, 20 and 23, will be coming up in hopefully will be coming up in a Whiskey Guild tasting very soon, so we might be streaming that too. So keep your eye on the channel. I'll leave all relevant links down below to, let's say, the Whiskey Guild and of course Paris, Texas, and myself and High Spirits. So we have the 10-year-old Old Rip Van Winkle, the 12-year-old Van Winkle Special Reserve, Lot B, they refer to that as, don't they?
Yeah.
And then we have the Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserves, 15, 20, and 23. So we're going to start left and eventually
get to the
right in some state. I suppose let's get a little bit of it in the glass as we start out, and you can walk us through, give us a bit of history and a bit of background.
Yeah, I suppose, unless you've been living under a rock in the bourbon world, as Brian has said, this is probably one of the most sought after whiskies in the world. I suppose the story starts back with Pappy in 1893 when he joined with W.L. Weller and Sons as a travelling salesman. So he looked after East Kentucky, and at the time they would have sold a lot of bourbon travelling around by horse and cart. And just for a bit of historical information, like W.L. Weller and Sons were rectifiers. So what they done was they bought some good whiskey, they made some not so good whiskey and bought some not so good whiskey and blended it all together to sell their own bottlings, and that's what Pappy sold.
Is a rectifier, if I'm correct, is that I did a bit of quick research on this before. A rectifier is kind of like a modern day bonder of sorts, or a merchant. And
I think it'd be a fair call, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think a lot of, I suppose, W.L. Weller were, I suppose, honest rectifiers.
Yeah.
So they would obviously bought and sold whiskey and blended and created their own blends and their own formulas. You had a lot of issues back, I suppose, in that period of time in the US with people making rectified whiskey, but really dangerous and bad whiskey. So you had probably a lot of ethanol in there, and you were killing people, making them go blind, which really wasn't the best.
Not great. Not great for a return sales.
No, really not. But look, you got your money, and
but they passed an act. I can't remember the year offhand. Do you remember the year?
That was your one of Buffalo Trace's, founding fathers, E.H. Taylor was partly responsible for the Bottle and Bond Act.
Bottle and Bond Act,
And the date absolutely escapes me right now.
I know, same as, and it's always the same on camera. Yeah. And I should actually mention that anybody that's watching this, I don't particularly normally drink bourbon. I'm kind of more, all my reviews, if you've seen anything on the channel, it's all Irish whiskey. So this for me is pretty much taking myself out of my comfort zone, 100%, entirely. So
you've gone to I suppose a very special place when you're going out of your comfort zone. So most people start at the entry level.
I don't mess around.
Going your premium.
I go top shelf.
You know what I mean?
I am top shelf the whole way.
We get the best some of the best bourbons in the world and put them on video. So yeah.
So the Old Rip Van Winkle, what year was that? Kind of came out.
Pappy, the story of Pappy goes on. Look, it starts obviously in when he started working for Wellers. How the Stitz of Weller Distillery formed was back in 1912. Pappy at the time had taken control of the Weller distillery, or the Weller brands, and commissioned the Stitzel distillery to create 1,000 barrels of bourbon for them, as a more premium label, and that was the direction Pappy wanted to bring to below Weller and Sons at the time, and they developed and grew that relationship, throughout the years, even during Prohibition, to the point where they actually merged in 1933, and the Stitzel Weller distillery was born. Pappy also had started building his own distillery just outside the city limits, so he didn't want to pay taxes.
To avoid taxes, yeah.
Yeah, clever man.
Clever man.
No one wants to pay taxes.
Nobody wants to pay taxes.
So that was, I suppose, I think it was Derby Day, 1933, just after Prohibition finished. The distillery was finished and opened, and that's when the Stitzel Weller distillery was really formed and born. So the legacy of what Pappy brought to bourbon really started then, when he only believed in your wheated mash bill, and he believed that, I suppose most, just for anyone who doesn't know, so your most bourbon mash bills are generally with corn, rye and malted barley. Pappy's mash bill was corn, wheat and malted barley, and he believed in making a Kentucky bourbon whiskey, a straight Kentucky bourbon whiskey, and the rye component generally wasn't grown in Kentucky, it was grown generally in Indiana. So
that's right, he wanted a full Kentucky.
So yeah, he wanted a full Kentucky bourbon product. So he decided to leave off that leftover grain from Pennsylvania and stuff, and decided to just make it his own individual bourbon.
So it was all wheat and obviously the malted barley, but there was no rye component in it whatsoever.
So you had your dominant grain was still corn to be a bourbon.
51%.
You're probably talking, this is well into the 60-70% of corn, and then you will have your wheat as your next grain, and then a small percentage of malted barley for fermentation.
And that's what kind of has always differentiated the Van Winkle kind of whiskey. And I know from doing a little bit of research, very little, that Weller actually used the same recipe.
Yeah, the Weller was always a wheated bourbon as well. So it kind of later on, I suppose, when we get through some more videos, Pappy eventually merged with Buffalo Trace Distillery, who owned the Weller brand at the time, so it was a natural.
It was actually Julian III, wasn't it? It was his grandson.
Yeah, Pappy's grandson.
Pappy's grandson, yeah.
They're all Julian. So you have Julian I, which is Pappy, you have Julian II, which was, Julian II served in World War II.
A serious man.
He was a tank commander, and and unfortunately he died way too young. He got cancer and died way too young. Just after Julian had joined the company, Julian III had joined the company with him. So,
and one of I read a book, Pappyland by Wright Thompson. If you get a chance, you might want to check that out. But it was interesting in the book. He said that the whole Van Winkle story wasn't a story of inheritance. It was actually a story of survival, because what Pappy Julian I created, it was actually Julian II or Junior that had to kind of unfortunately sell off the distillery.
It was a really tough point, and also there was a collection of factors that led to that. So Pappy believed in old time bourbon, and his there was a couple of pictures you see from his old distillery where you would see there was no chemists allowed. This is a bourbon distillery, not a bourbon factory. All we need here is nature and time and the know-how of a master distiller, and that's how you make good bourbon.
Fine bourbon.
And his motto was always fine bourbon at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must, but always fine bourbon. And it's funny that he always sold premium bourbon. That was his thing, and he was probably 60-70 years too early to be even considering selling premium bourbon, because I suppose his product was always 100 proof. It was always a minimum of kind of 7-8 years old. The Old Fitzgerald brand. And it wasn't somewhere you would find it in a diner or a saloon, you know, with cowboys drinking shots.
It was top shelf for its time.
Absolutely top shelf.
Yeah.
And that's what he prided himself on. He says men were always decked out in really good suits, and you know, it was always a pride thing, and you know, it was always fine bourbon, and he wanted to bring that quality to the people, you know.
Yeah. Well, should we have a little drink?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've never had these before, so I don't. I was told expect wonderful things, and I am excited. I mean, just until recently, I had the E.H. Taylor small batch, and I thought that was gorgeous. I wouldn't have normally. Rafter is always trying to get me to drink bourbon, and I tried that, and I was like, oh, we have to do the Van Winkle. Video and
it works out so well with you guys here in Paris, Texas are, you know, huge fans of Buffalo Trace and everything we do over in Buffalo Trace, so it's, you know, they get the reward, and they get to sell some pappies and get to have some pappies in the shelf. So
and it's kind of rare enough though that you would see, because they are all extremely limited kind of releases.
Well, I suppose to put it for people, look, we're obviously based here in Ireland, and I work for High Spirits, and we're Sazerac Ireland, so we're obviously the parent company of Buffalo Trace, and we distribute Pappy in Buffalo Trace and everything Buffalo Trace distillery here in Ireland, but the allocation of these things is so rare, it's so small. I remember my first year in High Spirits, we got 6 bottles of Van Winkle. 6 bottles for the country.
Oh my God. For the country.
Yeah, and like Ireland isn't big, but I suppose it's not. It's still.
And everyone knows everyone, especially in the industry. So 6 bottles is not going to go very far.
No, it doesn't, because look, you do a couple of tastings. You do, you know, Whiskey Live here in Ireland, and that's 2 bottles for a tasting. And all of a sudden you're left with 4 bottles, and you know, what do you do?
You tell them you lost them, and you keep them for yourself.
If only. I know I talked about that with the boss, but we could never come to an agreement.
No, and look, I know that now. I questioned you before we started the video that when we get onto it, I suppose we'll talk a little bit about it. But the 15-year-old is Buffalo Trace liquid, and there was a point of contention over the 20 and the 23, whether it's.
Yeah, I suppose to give it a little context. So when Buffalo Trace took custodianship or made into a partnership with Julian Van Winkle III in 2002, and Julian had some old Stitzer stock which he bought from Diageo for pennies. Diageo didn't really know what they
it's all part of the story.
Part of the story.
How he became so big, I suppose.
And so he only had a finite amount of stock, and for his brand to survive and his brand to continue, he had to find a partner. And when Buffalo Trace approached him, I think originally he said no, but then I suppose you need to just sit back and relax and go, actually, what do I want from this? So I actually want my brand to grow, and you know, the legacy of my grandfather and my father and our family to succeed. And I suppose that's where Buffalo Trace worked nicely, because we are a family-owned company, we're a privately owned company. We already had the Weller brand, which was the same mash bill as Pappy Van Winkle. And then we also used a similar style yeast strain as well to what Pappy would have used back in Stitzer Weller. So
I'm trying to remember what they said about the yeast strain that they used in. There was a reference made to it in the book, and now that you mention that, it actually sticks out, but I can't remember for the life of me. It's always the way. I could have recited it this morning to you backwards, and now as soon as you go on camera with a few lights, it's gone out of your head.
I can't remember. It's always the way, but it's worse. At least when you're on camera, it's just me and you. But if you're doing this in front of 80 people at a taste,
you want to have it polished,
and you're being heckled from the back.
Probably by me.
Yeah. So that's not quite as fun. Just on your Old Rip Van Winkle, the 10-year-old. So it's 107 proof. It's that wheated mash bill from Buffalo Trace. So your wheat, or corn wheat and malted barley. Aged for 10 years, and I suppose with most of the Van Winkles we age these probably mostly on lower floors, especially for the older brands. So there's going to be a combination of lower floors and higher floors in Buffalo Trace.
Is this the same recipe as the 15, 20, and 23?
Exactly the same juice.
Okay, so and it's the same as the Weller.
Yeah.
Right. I think there was somebody watched the video.
Special Reserve, Weller 107, Weller 12.
Okay.
And there's a couple of full proof now, and there's a craft your own perfect bourbon, I think.
So the only real difference is where they move them in the rack houses, and obviously the age, and these are all hand picked.
Yeah, I said the only difference, and the actual only difference is they're picked by, the Van Winkles.
Yeah.
So you have our master blender, Drew Mabel. Drew knows, what barrels generally, make great bourbon and what location they're in, because that's their job.
Yeah.
We're making bourbon in Buffalo Trace for over 240 years, so there's spots in each warehouse that have different characteristics and give different styles of flavours.
That's crazy when you think
and
about
it's, you know that, you only know that from time. And you know that from, just making whiskey over and over again, that area of the warehouse, be it on a mid-lower floor, but there's an extra draft coming through a window, and there's an extra bit of sun, and the barrels are a bit tighter in the ricks, so it's warmer in the summer, but it maintains a better temperature in the winter.
It's crazy because, as I said at the start, predominantly I drink Irish whiskey, and the Irish whiskey climate they say is meant to be kind of perfect for aging and maturing whiskey. But when I started reading up about bourbon in the States, it's incredible how fast it evaporates. The angel share is just through the roof, and it's very rare to see 23-year-old, 20-year-old, these whiskeys and how they actually manipulate the flavors by moving it up through the warehouses and rickhouses. I say warehouses, but rickhouses, I mean,
Potato.
Potato, yeah.
But it really is. I mean, it typically when in Buffalo Trace we generally lose anywhere from 10 to 12% of the barrel volume in the first year. That's the evaporation. That's
10 to 12.
10 to 12. Yeah. Anywhere up to 10% is kind of normal.
Yeah.
But depending on where it is and which brick house it in, be it a metal clad or a stone clad, you'll have different types of evaporation. But then it can anywhere from 4 to 6% a year thereafter.
Yeah.
So it's, when you get to 23 years old, you're talking litres in the end.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, we've talked, I don't know, 20 minutes maybe?
Yeah.
Should we
get some drinking?
Should we get a little Old Rip Van Winkle 10-year-old into us here?
Absolutely.
The nose is really kind of, you're getting the wood element, you're getting a little
bit of spice, but lots of fruit.
Lots of fruits, yeah.
When you give it a swirl around the glass as well, you can see it just hanging off the glass. So, with bourbon, it's naturally high in sugar. So you have that really thick, there's a thick creaminess in there as well.
It's very light on spice. Very fruit forward.
Yeah, it really is. When you taste it, it'll be quite different. So I suppose versus your Taylor you tasted, a couple of weeks ago, your Taylor obviously had that rye component.
Yeah.
So rye does a couple of things in a bourbon barrel. In a barrel, you get, it makes the rye a bit bolder. It's a bit spicier the longer it's aged. And then you have different kinds of spice, and you're not going to get that spice coming in this.
Yeah.
So the only spice you're going to get from the Van Winkles will be barrel spice. You don't have that rye spice.
Yeah,
so it's a different kind of spice, especially when we get up to 15, 20, 23. The oak just starts to really come into its own, and so that's the, it's barrel management when you get to this, this level of aging.
Let's try and get there.
Will we make the trip?
Will we make the trip?
Yeah.
Good point. Sláinte or cheers?
Sláinte, yeah.
Sláinte.
Oh my.
I mean, that's just a different animal.
Every time. I've had the pleasure of tasting all of these bourbons quite a number of times, and every time I taste them, I go, well. And I say this often a lot, right? But from the nose to the palate to the finish, you get that sugary coating, but it's all balanced. Everything complements one another. There's nothing really kind of out of whack or out of place there. And you can see what I mean, I suppose, straight away by that little bit of spice. You don't have that rye white pepper spice in the top of your tongue, which is quite typical.
Lovely.
It's a lot more inside your tongue and your cheeks.
Barrel spice.
Barrel spice.
Even now, I'm just getting an overwhelming, beautiful vanilla kind of coating.
Lots of creaminess. There's a nice buttery mouthfeel that comes from the wheat.
Yeah, so to sum up, an absolutely gorgeous whiskey, beautiful across the whole palate, nose, finish, really kind of decadent, really dense, really more
buttery and creamy, and it's starting to develop. Really, you can see that breed of bourbon, really starting to take shape at 10 years old.
Like the initial, you couldn't blame someone for thinking that the bourbon is so pure and so clean. It nearly has that sherry kind of element to it, where you're talking, your kind of raisin coming through.
You have big dark fruits.
You have
raisins. cherries, plums, and I think as you get up more into the Pappy range, those fruits get darker and deeper.
Yeah.
And you get a lot more kind of tobacco spice starting to build up as you go through the aging. So
I think what we might do actually is we'll go straight into the Lot B, and we'll have a little sample of that just to compare them while we have the two of them out, and then we'll jump into in another video maybe on the 15 and the 20 and the 23.
So we're going to go for quite a change here from the 10-year-old to the 12-year-old. So the 10-year-old is 10 years old, 107 proof, which is 53.5% ABV.
Yeah.
And then the 12-year-old, we've dialed back that ABV, so we're going back to 90.4 proof.
Okay.
But you've increased the age. So now we're going to see how they're starting to play with your barrel influence. So how your barrel is going to make the difference where it's aged. And you're going to know, I know from me personally, 12 is a completely different whiskey to the 10. I don't know whether it's where to put it in the warehouse or what way it's designed, but it has a slightly different profile. But let's see. Yeah, we have the 10 there. I'm going to come back to that. A small little drop left in the glass for it. The hang time in the glass is incredible on this one. It's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Way richer. I kind of think more kind of not near as much spice coming through. You don't have that kind of element fighting through you. You're getting way more of those dark fruit notes.
Yeah. Lots of sweetness. Lots of toffee and
caramel, like that lovely kind of smoky caramel flavor. Sláinte. Do it again. It is incredible.
So much lighter.
You notice the proof,
the drop. Yeah, absolutely.
But you're getting more of the flavors from the aging in the barrel coming through on it.
It's really a showcase on influence and difference between barrel and mash bill. How you can bring one mash bill and use it in different barrels in different warehouses and create infinite numbers of different styles of whiskey. There's
an incredible change on the finish. You're getting whereas in this one now I got way more kind of vanilla notes on the finish. Coat of the palate was sticking out sweeter. This one is kind of more caramel.
Yeah, it's softer, it's a little bit lighter.
Yeah, lighter is another.
That spice, you're getting plenty of barrel spice, a little bit more barrel spice I think in this one.
You are.
But the finish isn't quite as long because you have that drop in ABV, so it doesn't carry.
It's not carrying as much.
But it's beautifully delicate.
Yeah, much more delicate than the higher proof and the younger one. Which one do you prefer?
I'm all about big, bold and brash. It's 10-year-old all day long.
I think I have to agree with you. I like a lot of ABV and higher proof whiskey.
It's this spice and the bigger, more dominant fruit flavors. I think for the 10-year-old for me that get it.
Yeah,
and it's that extra peak in ABV.
It's wonderfully. Borderline that more complex obviously throughout the whole the nose and obviously the palate and the finish, but it does lack that kick that the 10.
Yeah, I mean some people love that. I know I've done numerous tastings and you would have nearly a 50-50 split of people who prefer the 10-year-old versus the 12-year-old or they prefer the 12 to the 10. It's nearly 50-50, but some people just don't want that big spice and that big ABV, and the 12-year-old is so balanced and delicate and, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. Now, there's not saying that's not beautiful, but that's a total, I even just went back to it there. And it's just...
No, it's a different...
There's a kick-ass kind of ABV kick and, barrel kick and fruits. A whole lot, it is just that bit more brash, bit more bold. But that's kind of like the refined gentleman. That's the young lad going out on a Saturday night.
Yeah. Yeah, you're more chance.
I do that sometimes. I make stupid comparisons sometimes, but that's,
Yeah, that's sitting down, maybe with a cube of ice, smoking a cigar, just chilling out in the evening time. That's a little bit more...
Party.
Yeah, a little more party.
Yeah. Still absolutely phenomenal whiskies, and it's my first time to have them, and on camera too, so...
Yeah.
And this is not, we're not editing this together or anything. It is what it is. But fantastic whiskies. So this is actually part 1 of 2 now. So we did the 10 and the 12, and in the next video, and I'll leave all the links below in case you're watching one or the other, which one first. But I'll leave links down below to all of the relevant information. Paris, Texas Bar, of course, High Spirits, Buffalo Trace, and of course the next video that we're going to be doing. So stay tuned. If you did like any of that and you're not a subscriber of the channel, make sure that you do that now. And of course, don't forget to give a thumbs up. You know, we took a lot of time out of our busy Friday to come and drink whiskey at 10 o'clock in the morning. I think that deserves a thumbs up. What do you think?
Damn right, yeah.
I give it 2 if I could.
It's a tough job.
God only knows what way it's going to be towards the end of this. But listen, thanks to Ian and of course High Spirits and of course Paris, Texas and the Kilkenny Whiskey Guild for having us in here today and let us sample some of the finest whiskey and the finest bourbon whiskey in the world. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and be sure to check out our second part of the series, which we will be going to now in a minute. For the Whiskey Chaser, out for now. We'll see you soon. Launch it.
Cheers.